For 40 years, we've had an economy that rewards people who ship American jobs overseas and raises taxes on American workers, and we're flipping that on its head. We're going to cut taxes for American workers and for American companies that build here. We're going to make it harder to ship American jobs overseas. It's a total shift in the way that we've done economic policy in the United States of America, but it was necessary.
That was Vice President J.D. Vance earlier this morning talking about why President Trump decided to impose all these tariffs on some of America's top trading partners. With us now is Texas Democratic Congressman Greg Casar. He sits on the Oversight and Education and Workforce Committees. He is also chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. It's always a pleasure to see you, Congressman. Thank you for being with us. On X, you posted, tariffs can be a good tool, like a scalpel is a good tool in surgery. What Donald Trump is doing is more like using a chainsaw for brain surgery. So what would be, Congressman, a scalpel in the world of tariffs?
Tariffs can be a good tool if you actually care about American workers. When foreign companies are dumping products in illegally at sub-market rates to try to destroy American companies and competitions, when they're dumping their products in and sometimes use not just low-cost labor, but sometimes slave labor, it makes sense to use tariffs and then support and subsidize the American worker and the American company to produce here at home. But what Donald Trump is doing is just a blanket set of tariffs on his tour, to just try to feel like he's the most powerful person in the world and be able to be on phone calls with foreign leaders and feel like a big man. But we know that he doesn't actually care about American workers, because at the same time that he's putting these tariffs into effect, he's trying to give billionaires and big CEOs in America and across the world an enormous tax break. So what folks at home need to know is that Donald Trump promised you he was going to work to support the American worker and that he was going to work to lower prices. And Donald Trump lied through his teeth. He's been doing nothing to lower prices. Really, what he's spending his time doing is trying to be buddies with billionaires, the CEOs of enormous companies, and leave American workers out to dry while jacking up prices for the everyday consumer.
So, Congressman, is your main opposition the motives behind these policies, or is it the fact that, for example, in the case of China, which is one of the countries that, to use your terms, I mean, clearly has in the past and in many industries been dumping into the United States with very little repercussions, right? Any negative repercussions. They have the way the human rights violations that China carries out within its own people and the Uyghurs. I mean, it's just mind-boggling how human rights are violated in China, and yet the products from China are welcome in the United States. So what is it? Is it a questioning of the motives behind the policy, or is it the flipping of the economic policy, the shift in economic policy that the vice president referred to it as?
Yeah, let me be clear here. There is a good way to impose tariffs. Just like President Biden said, for example, we are going to have tariffs on foreign steel while supporting the American steel industry. And you can do that in a smart and thoughtful way without putting tariffs on every single good, pushing them up to levels without really clear explanation about why you've even set it at that level, other than having Donald Trump's son go on the internet, threaten foreign leaders and say, come deal with my dad, or maybe with other members of my family who you can cut a check to or cut a deal with. And so the policy and the motives are all tangled up here together, is what I think is really clear we need to know. Is he is doing something outrageous and reckless and blanket and across the world, while saying that his motive, just like it's always been, is come enrich me and my family and my donors, and maybe you'll get an exemption, or maybe you'll get some help. So this isn't to help the American worker. If it was, that's what the plan would clearly show. But what the plan is come cut a deal with Donald Trump, just like we saw, for example, with Mark Zuckerberg here this last week. The Biden administration was rightfully looking into Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's companies, for abusing American consumers, taking advantage of American small businesses. And now Zuckerberg goes and cuts Donald Trump a $25 million settlement check. Next thing you know, he's got invited to the White House. So Trump, on one hand, is telling reporters at your network that he doesn't care whether prices go up for the American workers. He said he could care less. But what he does care about is what people that donated to his campaign think, people that could cut him a check personally think.
And so, Congressman, you being in the minority in the House, you being the minority in the Senate, and the White House being Republican, what is it that you see you can do?
What we can do is speak out, build up the pressure, and get to the point where we just get 3 members of the Republican majority to stand up and do the right thing. Just this week, we heard that the Republicans are starting to get nervous about their plan to cut Medicaid in order to pay for billionaire tax cuts. We've got to amp up the pressure. Just now, we're hearing Donald Trump is starting to get nervous about Elon Musk continuing to slash so many federal jobs. We've got to amp up the pressure. The jobs report here that just came out for the month of March, we had the greatest number of announced layoffs last month in American history since the pandemic. The only other time we've had that number of layoffs announced was during the pandemic. And so the economic pain and the increased prices that Americans are feeling, Democrats in the minority need to be bold, speak out and say, we have a plan for actually lowering prices. And that means holding big corporations and big CEOs accountable for price gouging, not these reckless blanket tariff plans from Donald Trump that are not actually meant to bring jobs home.
Congressman Greg Casar, thank you for being with us today. I very much appreciate your time.
Thank you for your time.